Welcome to the Filmcast review of Love Lies Bleeding. I'll read the plot summary from the internet. Quote, Lou is a reclusive gym manager who falls hard for Jackie, an ambitious bodybuilder who's heading to Las Vegas to pursue her dream. Their love soon leads to violence as they get pulled deep into the web of Lou's criminal family, end quote. Joining us today for our review of Love Lies Bleeding, she is an editor at slashfilm.com and the co-host of the podcast This Ends at Prom, BJ Colangelo. Welcome back to the Filmcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me back.
So great to have you, BJ. I think this is one of those movies that is BJ Colangelo catnip.
Yeah, made for you specifically.
That
BJ.
is genetically engineered to appeal to BJ Colangelo.
I feel like every time you invite me on, it's for a movie that is hitting just every box that I could possibly hit.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this movie. This is the second film by Rose Glass. Her first film was Saint Maud. Have any of us seen Saint Maud, by the way? I was a huge fan of it. BJ,
I've not, but now I need to.
Yeah.
I really liked Saint Maud.
Really great sort of small indie budget horror film kind of thing with some great imagery. There was a really awkward moment at Sundance, by the way, which is when I first saw this film, when the person at Sundance introduced this film and pointed out the fact that Saint Maud did not play at Sundance, and I'm like, why did you need to? You didn't need to bring that up.
No, she's here now, man.
Yeah. He's like, we didn't play Saint Maud, but we have this one, and it's like, okay, I mean, I wouldn't have even known. Anyway.
I think that's more of a cell phone, right? It's like we messed up. Saint Maud should have been here.
That's what I'm hoping was the intention. Yeah,
it should have been because that movie was really good. Okay, all that said, BJ Colangelo, why don't we start with some overall thoughts on Love Lies Bleeding? What'd you think of this film?
Oh, I don't know if anything's going to top this movie for me this year. I've been looking at the release calendars, and I'm like, I might have hit my peak early.
I don't know if you're aware of this. Ghostbusters Frozen Kingdom or whatever is coming out next week.
Frozen Empire.
So, that might be a contender, right? What do you think?
Look, I'm sure that I'll have fun with it, but am I going to get buff women and lesbians and a dusty, filthy, sweaty noir? Probably not.
All right, I guess we're watching different versions of that movie. But yeah, what did you? Why is this movie so high on the list for you, BJ?
Because it lets me revel in all of my worst impulses. I don't know if that's a little bit too confessional for your listeners or not, but it's everything that I love, but it's everything that I love that makes me have, we said it beforehand, before we recorded, kind of that sicko mode sort of sensation of these are characters that are really messy. They're getting into situations that are very despicable. We have violence, we have sex, we have everything that I really, really enjoy and love to see in the movies, but we don't get to see, especially in our current landscape, very often. So getting to see that was such a nice breath of fresh air. And I like Rose Glass's cinematic style. I like her storytelling technique and how she uses really horrific imagery that is simultaneously so beautiful that you can't look away from it no matter how grotesque it gets.
Can we take just a little bit of a tangent / rabbit hole for a moment? And and this is for everyone, not just BJ, but I'm curious. Like you were saying, this is not the kind of movie we get in today's cinematic environment. I think it is fair to say that a lot of movies that come out these days are sexless, right? There's not very many sex scenes in movies today, and I think it's a very complicated. There's complicated reasons why that's the case, but I'm curious, BJ, if you have like a theory of the case as to why that is, or if there is like one reason that trumps them all for you, or and anyone else here. I'm curious. Go ahead.
There's like 75 different layers. This is an incredibly nuanced one.
Totally.
But the main one that I keep looking back at is twofold, is that one, younger generations and even, some millennial generations are living with their parents longer and longer. And there is sort of this like weird surveillance of coming of age when your parents are watching every move. It makes it a lot harder to discover the weirdo perv things that you might be really into. And so it constantly is going to elicit a sense of uncomfortability. And then you kind of carry that Pavlovian response with you further and further. And I also think that it is an overcorrection due to the, very necessary reclamation that we've had to have about sexual violence, about the depiction of sexual violence on screen. The pendulum just hasn't swung back to the middle yet. We're still in an overcorrection state of, well, we can't have any of it.
It's all bad. Yeah.
I've seen it reflect, like, first of all, younger people are having less sex in general in society, according to statistics. And I've also seen it reflected in discourse about movies online, where people are saying, I don't know why sex scenes are important, and I do think that used well, sex scenes can tell you a lot about characters in movies and what their state of mind is, what their motivations are, and so forth, what their personalities are. But we just don't see it very often in movies.
Well,
today.
you say that,
yeah,
and I don't think it's wrong, but also we just had Drive Away Dolls. We had Poor Things not too long ago. I think
it's coming back.
We've had some of that.
The pendulum is starting to swing back a little bit.
Like lower budget
we're
things. Yeah, lower budget, maybe mid-tier entries. Nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's not like the heyday of the 90s when erotic thrillers were the things everybody was going to the movie theater to see.
Yeah.
It's so different now.
Well, it's hard to put intense sex scenes in superhero movies. So,
I mean,
you can't have the top, the high budget.
You've not seen James Gunn's Super, have you?
Yeah. I think it's a deliberate choice. I mean, the closest we got to a sex scene in a superhero film was The Eternals. Remember that? There was one sex scene in The Eternals, and it was like probably one of the most chaste sex scenes I've ever seen.
So chaste
was in The Eternals. But anyway, it has happened, just not very often. Devindra Hardawar, your overall thoughts on Love Lies Bleeding?
Yeah, perfect movie. I love this freaking movie. I don't know. There are many things coming out this year. This is like going to be at the top of my list for a while because it is so. It's just so wonderfully grimy and weird and pure noir, but also like a very weird universe of what it's into. Like, there's just so much going on in this movie too, and we'll dive into a lot of this in spoilers. But I do think, no joke, it is kind of ultimately about love. It is about love and the extremes it takes us to, and what you do to protect your children, even if you may be an evil person. Like that is that recurring theme. I think there's an inherent sweetness to this movie and almost a romantic side to this movie, amidst all the ultra violence and the psychedelic imagery and whatever. But I love that. I love that a movie that can have all these things can also have this undercurrent of emotion that I think really rings true. This movie just looks fantastic. I love everybody in it. Like, this is an all-timer Ed Harris performance of just like sheer weird Ed Harris. Like, we just talked about The Abyss a little bit and how much, I love him so much. I love him showing up in things, but this is just a great one. I feel like everyone is used here. Dave Franco as the perfect dweeb, like a perfect weaselly dweeb. The hair is so good in this movie, and the way the hair tells you about the characters. Of course, Dave Franco's character has like a mullet rat tail. Ed Harris's character has the worst haircut I've ever seen, but he is so cool about it. He's still in command of it. Like, it's just so compelling. Like how every layer of this movie, I think, tells us so much about the characters. I love a nice little fucked up romance, and this is one of those. And I just love this movie that it's allowed to be so weird, that's so stylish. I think it's incredibly sharp as a character piece, but it's also just a ton of fun. Like, this is my kind of movie. I'm glad we're seeing more of these things now. We did just talk about Drive Away Dolls, and I feel like that is a less maybe less successful version of something like this, but I also love that. So I love that we have this great run of niche films at this point now too. Just give me all the noir. Everything should be told in noir format, please.
Jeff Kanata, your thoughts on Love Lies Bleeding?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts on Love Lies Bleeding are best summed up in the form of a limerick.
All right, let's hear it, Jeff.
Watch Stuart, the mistress of sulk, as steroids give Jackie some bulk. This film is a warning. No matter how horny, don't ever start dating the Hulk.
But I wanna.
Maybe
Jeff.
Maybe if you're a coward, don't date the Hulk.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm ready for that challenge. Let's go.
I also love this movie. I had so much fun with it. I disagree with Devindra on one point, though. I think this movie is an indictment of love. I think this movie is
I mean,
a warning label on love that
Romeo
says
and Juliet
love will
is
make
called a
you
love
do
story.
very stupid things.
This goes back to Romeo and Juliet, like that love did not work out so well for people there,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's
I don't
still
know.
a thing. Yeah.
I think it's even more damning than Romeo and Juliet in a lot of ways, because Romeo and Juliet relies on misunderstandings, and this does not.
Stupid teens,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I had so much fun with it. BJ, you had the perfect description: dusty, sweaty, dirty. I love, and Devindra, you said grimy. It is that. I love the cinematography, and the art direction, the set direction, the set design. It is everything just feels like it's got a layer on it, an extra layer of nobody cleaned up here. And in every place that we visit, the gym especially, where the movie starts, but every single place just feels like not only lived in, but just sort of unkept. And there's this kind of wonderful texture to that, and a texture to their romance, and this entire seedy world that is revealed as the movie progresses. And it is one of those movies that I really love, where a series of it's hell's paved with the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? It's a series of doing my best to make the best out of this, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And being inside that snowball as it goes down the mountain of calamity, it's so much fun. It's so much fun to be inside the tension of that, the mania of that, of, oh my God, everything I try to do to make this better is making it worse. And the script does that so well. It tightens the screws so well, and you start rooting for these people. Although I have to say, if I had a gripe, a minor complaint, it would be especially the very last moment of this movie, which I won't spoil, but I don't know if I ultimately really want to root for these people.
I know exactly what you're talking about. We'll talk about it in spoilers, but
Yeah.
I had
think
a similar
overall,
feeling. I had a very similar feeling. Yeah.
Overall, it's like, oh, I'm inside this experience, and at the I come out the other side going, I don't know if I should have been rooting for that at all.
I that's exactly how I felt leaving the theater watching this film. I'll share a few thoughts, and then we have a lot to talk about in spoilers. But I really like this movie, and there's a couple of things that I just want to point out. First of all, I love how grounded Kristen Stewart's performance is in this film. Like, that's the thing, is she brings a relatability and a kind of like, you can imagine yourself like knowing this person, interacting with this person. And that's extremely important for this film, when all the stuff that's going on is spinning wildly out of control in near fantastical ways, and occasionally explicitly fantastical ways. And so, like, Kristen Stewart's performance really makes this thing work for me. But beyond that, we haven't really talked about Katie O'Brien. I don't wish to objectify. I don't wish to objectify in any way, but I will say that it is atypical to see somebody of that physique in that's a woman in any movie at all, and she is incredible in this film. Like, she is such a commanding presence. I think this is her first real, like, prominent feature film, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, she was in Ant-Man, the last Ant-Man. She was a side character in Quantumania, and I remember seeing her character and being like, "Who is that person? Like, that person should be in more movies." And I'm glad that this exists for her.
Right? Yeah. Is it fair to say this is her first lead role in a film?
Yeah,
I think this is her first, like, especially lead feature.
Yeah, and
she's great,
and she's amazing. She looks amazing. Obviously, the people who made the poster for this movie thought that she looked amazing as well. And that is a role that demands a lot, not only just physically, but also that character goes through the full spate of emotions throughout the course of this film, and it just is. You see a movie that asks an actor to rise to the challenge sometimes, and this is a case where that's happened with Katie O'Brien. So.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. I want to underscore that point because there are those of us on this podcast old enough to have lived through the 80s, and a time when physicality was a component of some big stars a presence on screen, and often that physicality came at the expense of performance. And I think it's an amazing thing that we've gotten to this place in modern times. You know, I think Dave Bautista is another great example of this, but certainly Katie O'Brien, like there's no compromise, right? She brings physicality is a huge part of this role, and it would be impossible to tell this story in this movie without an actor that brought that. But she also brings an exquisite performance, like a raw, very daring, bold performance. And I think that it's an amazing thing that she's able to, you know, we have an actor that's able to marry those two things in this film in such a perfect way.
Yeah.
To what you were saying, Dave, though, like I understand like not wanting to objectify an actor, but this movie does. In fact, this movie is an act of objectification in certain ways, but it's also like, hey, you can do this respectfully and responsibly. And isn't cinema really just a lens for voyeurism, right? Like this movie is asking so much of us in that way. And I do think I think some movies, especially like erotic thrillers, used to do this. Paul Verhoeven knew how to do this, and we certainly have lost our way in that respect. So I do appreciate that aspect of this movie.
There's no question we've lost the recipe on how to accurately like do this. Because the thing I find so fascinating is that because Katie O'Brien is, you know, the pinnacle of muscle mommydom in this movie, there is a fine line to walk that fluctuates between like this lecherous perversion of objectification, but at the same time the general public finds really buff women to be grotesque and to be ugly. And so the camera is doing such a beautiful dance whenever they are focusing on her, because there are some moments where you're looking at her, you're like, how does your body do this? There's almost a body horror fascination, but then immediately you're like, but it's so hot. Like it's so undeniably hot. It's such like a mind trip, and I love it.
I do love it. We used to have more muscle mommies in movies too. Like let's talk about the 80s. Let's talk about the 90s, like Vasquez in Aliens, you know, or
Brigitte Nielsen.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also remember
y'all are just talking about like ripped women. I did a list of buff women for an article I did on Slash Film. And, you know, we're talking about like the bodybuilder women turned actors, people like Bev Francis who were in Pumping Iron 2 showing up randomly, having low budget, cheap movies like Ravenhawk, or
I remember that. Yeah.
The Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, what is it, Double Impact, where he's two of himself.
Double Impact.
You've got, you know, the henchwoman who's the predatory lesbian whose biceps could crush a watermelon. We had buff women, but we, you know, generally culture doesn't get on board with buff women the way that
it
they
does
do
kind
buff
of stop
men.
at ripped women, right? I remember the conversations. Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2, everyone was like, oh man, look at those arms. I'm like, she's good. She definitely worked out a lot for that movie, but look at Katie O'Brien, or look at like most of the people on your list. BJ, I remember reading that piece.
Yeah, that's a piece called "The 10 Best Movies About Buff Women Ranked," including Love Lies Bleeding. That's by BJ Colangelo at slashfilm.com. I can sum up that list in one sentence. We used to be a society.
We used to.
We used to be a society that had buff women on screen, and
I think we are starting to course correct a little bit. And I will, you know, toot my own horn as a lifelong fan of professional wrestling. I'm glad the rest of the world is finally catching up. But there are a couple of female wrestlers working today, Rhea Ripley, Jade Cargill, and Bianca Belair are the three that I'll name drop, that I think people have seen gifs of them on the internet and have seen the open thirsting that other people have done. And there's now a generation of men who are starting to be a little bit more open about how, wow, that would be really cool to have a woman just throw me against a wall. That'd be sick. And I think that's making other men feel comfortable in talking about it, because unfortunately, when we talk about, you know, culture, the male 18 to 49 demo is what a lot of things cater to. So if men are willing to be open about their, you know, turning into J. Jonah Jameson of give me more photos of muscle mommies, then I think the rest of cinema is allowed to follow suit. And that's just great for us all.
I think there's a clear example, by the way, of how this movie proved like how much culture needed something like this. It is the picture of the guy who wanked himself to sleep while watching this movie. And listen, that is That is just approval right there. That guy had a good night. He had a plan for himself.
I don't know what you're
yeah.
referring to.
The film
but
cast-
Jeff, how do you know
Just
what
so-
I'm
not know
referring
about
to?
The film cast
No.
does not endorse any kind of
Of course,
lecherous
yeah,
acts publicly of any kind. I just
Not
want to put that out
Yeah,
there.
flip it into your waistband. Be an adult,
He did it in
boys.
a
Come
movie
on.
theater.
we
Yeah,
endorse it
yeah.
privately, though,
So,
very much so.
Jeff,
Sure.
what happened is a guy got drunk and started pleasuring himself during a public screening of Love Lies Bleeding, passed out, and then was arrested because of.
Well, no, he passed out. He was still fully exposed. Next to him were like 3 bottles of Fireball whiskey. Also, like the coke
A
he
tray
was
of
sneaking
cocaine.
into in the cigarettes. Like just an amazing. Like this guy.
We
loved
read
this
different
movie.
websites. Is
Yeah,
what I'm.
that's just the
gathering.
internet. Jeff.
Absolutely,
That's
yeah.
just Twitter.
Yeah.
Jeff,
go ahead.
I just wanted to lend my voice of support to what BJ said about wrestling, honestly, because the last 10 years, not even 10 years, 8 years of the women's division of the WWE has exploded and completely changed what, there were a few women wrestlers here and there. China, a buff woman in the 90s, right, was kind of looked at with this weird, I think, prejudice, and she was not allowed to wrestle with the women. She had to wrestle with the men, all these strange things. And that has completely changed. And I think it's an example of where that is, I think, changing the culture, as BJ pointed out. It
Definitely
really is the mainstreamification of the women's division of the WWE, I think, has done huge things to the perception of women in this regard. And I think, say what you will about wrestling, there's certainly lots to criticize there, but I think this is one example of something pretty positive that's happened in having the women's division be parallel to the men, and be not just parallel in stature, but popularity. Like, people love the women's division now, and it's done a lot to make strides there.
All right. Before we get to spoilers, I just want to point out that in the 90s there used to be twin movies. Remember, we'd get Deep Impact and Armageddon, and we would get Volcano and Dante's Peak, and all these movies. And I realized, like, Drive Away Dolls and Love Lies Bleeding are like not twin movies, but they're like kind of close. They're like they're both movies that take place decades ago, that have 2 lesbians as leads, and they're both noir movies. But very, very different in tone.
You know that meme of the houses in Santa Monica that are next to each other, where one is like all black and the other one is like the Barbie pink and purple?
Yeah.
That's Love Lies Bleeding and Drive Away Dolls for me. It's the same house, same movie, wildly different in its presentation.
I want to ask you, before we get to spoilers, BJ, where you land on the this movie is a thumbs up for love or a thumbs down for love.
All right. So here's the thing. I think that this movie is a thumbs up for love, but it is approaching it from the Joy Division "Love Will Tear You Apart."
Yes.
Sort of
that's a thumbs down in my opinion.
Sorry.
Listen, I blew up my entire life to be with my wife because it is very hard to be queer in this country. So did it tear me apart? Yes. Was it worth every second? Absolutely.
Fair point.
All right. Let's get to spoilers for Love Lies Bleeding starting right now. There's 2 big scenes towards the end that I want to talk about. One is the scene where, I mean, I don't even really know how to interpret all the stuff of Katie O'Brien becoming Hulk, like actually becoming a giantess and all that stuff. And so, BJ, I'm just kind of curious, like, what your take on was that. And then, of course, I want to get to Jeff's comment about the very last scene of the movie, which did leave me feeling bad about myself. But BJ, what do you think of kind of the final set piece or whatever I think it's at Harris' character's house, right? And Katie O'Brien becoming massive in proportions, like
becoming a kaiju.
Yeah. What's your interpretation? Like, how do you read all that?
So I believe that Rose Glass does this thing in both of her movies, and I will not spoil Saint Maud by any stretch of the imagination, but she does this thing with her movies where we see the interior thoughts of characters, and it's up to us to decide if this is reality or if this is just in their head. And I very much am of the impression that she's not actually a kaiju. She's not actually a superhero, but this is definitely how she feels. This is
Mm.
the sensation she's having. And my proof and my evidence for this being in her head and in a fantasy world is that when they are running through like the cosmos, Lou is wearing a sequined sports bra. Lou does not own a single item of sequined clothing. I'm sorry, that character does not. That's how I know this is a fantasy. So that
Mm.
is my read on it. But it is that thing of like when you are so, like, the metaphor that I was using with somebody the other day is you hear those stories about like moms that suddenly get like massive strength and can flip cars when
Mhm,
their children
mhm.
are in danger. When you love somebody this much, you can become the size of a kaiju and take down their abusive dad with a skullet.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Beautifully
Mentally,
said.
I
Yeah.
love the shot of them running through the cosmos, by the way, because that's in the trailer. And in the trailer, I never had the idea that she was a giant doing that. It felt like this
Right.
perspective of her just being really close to the camera and Kristen Stewart like right behind her, and that still works too. So that's the other thing.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
that all makes it. That all adds up to me. I guess the
Mhm.
only thing is, I was trying to figure out. Like, again, my first time watching this movie, I was at Sundance, and so it was mind blowing. By the way, because it's not only that no one had seen this movie before, but it's rare to see a movie like this.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
general, and I think I was just trying to figure out, like, is the movie trying to say something about like steroid use or like obsession with weightlifting, like what that character's obsessions are and the cost of them? Because obviously there's that horrible scene where she flips out at the weightlifting competition.
Mhm,
Well,
Um,
that's the setup for this other moment, right?
mhm.
That's how you
yeah,
know the language of the movie is we
Hmm.
see her have this
right,
very effects laden thing come out of her mouth, and then oh no, she was just throwing up on stage, right?
right, right, right,
Mhm,
So
right,
Hmm.
right.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that
yeah,
gives you a template to interpret the end, where we're not actually growing to kaiju size.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
is a metaphor that is made manifest.
I
Yeah,
do
yeah.
love we get a glimpse of Gulliver's Travels at the beginning too, right? Like they're an old film
Mm,
there. Yeah,
Hmm.
so
yeah, yeah. Yeah, Jeff, I think it's less about like what is actually happening in that scene, right? And more like what is the movie trying to say about what is happening in that scene, right?
yeah.
It goes to that question of, is the movie um in support of any of this? Because there's this moment at the end of the movie where what's her name? Daisy
Hmm.
is in the trunk of the bed of the vehicle they're in. Um, she has been shot, I think, in the head or neck or that area, and so everyone thinks that she's dead.
Mhm.
And then she starts making noise, and so they realize, hey, we gotta take care of the situation. So they pull over and just uh, finish. They deliver a coup de grace.
It's not they. It's
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 just
just
Kristen
Kristen
Stewart.
Stewart
Yes,
because
Kristen Stewart delivers the coup de
Katie
grace.
O'Brien's asleep.
Yes, that's right. And then that resolves that situation, and it was kind of this whole like, Jeff, why don't you describe your thoughts about it, because it seems like you're a little bit torn about this, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an overt act of evil, right? It's an overt. Like everything up to that point. I mean,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
could sort of try to say
right,
they were bad
right.
people doing. I mean, obviously, Katie O'Brien like shooting her in the head, but I
Mhm.
don't. And Harris made her do it, and even Kristen
Yeah,
Stewart's like,
yeah,
"My dad told you had to do it.
yeah,
You had
yeah,
no
yeah,
choice." And I'm like, I'm sort of on board with that. But
yeah,
then it's like, oh, she's not dead. Oh, thank God we're not even murderers in that regard. Oh wait, no, we're definitely murderers
I
now.
mean, what is the alternative like option is the thing. Like I understood it as like, okay, I'm committed. I'm committed to this relationship and
That's
everything.
bad. That's a bad
Okay,
thing.
that's fine. You could call it bad. Like, but yeah, I think a ton of like crime films, especially like the leads we're following are not good people. We follow them to the end. We're like, oh well, I would not be friends with those people, but you know, there to me, what the movie is saying is like that is the commitment to that relationship. You can judge it however you want, but the reason it's happening is that this is what I want to be in. I want to be in this relationship. I don't want this person out here who can ruin it all, who can send us all to jail or wherever exposed. So I
But that is
understood it on that level.
well, I
So
understood it as well,
Obviously
but I think
bad.
that in and of itself undermines my support for that. That in and of itself leads me to that place of this movie is saying love will turn you into
Mhm.
a bad person. That'll
yeah.
literally destroy you in some way. Go ahead, BJ.
BJ, yeah, BJ.
however, comma. So first off, R.I.P. Daisy, you would have loved veneers, but
Yep.
she absolutely has to go. Not even just for the oh, she's going to snitch and like she's going to ruin this all. But also, lest we forget, she attempts to blackmail Lou and is like, you have to have sex with me and be my girlfriend and fuck me, or I'm going to rat you out. So she's a bad person. And
She's not blameless. Yeah.
Yeah, she did that to Lou because that's like their big fight. Is Jackie's like, I can't believe you went back to her. She's like, what? No, that was for us. I had to like keep her quiet. So no, Daisy can also sleep with the fishes, whatever the desert equivalent of that phrase is.
The scorpions.
Because she's a sexual menace and took advantage of them. So bye.
Shout out to Anna Bershnikov, by the way. Fantastic. Just
Can
amazing.
I just double click on that a little bit, BJ? Did she explicitly do any of those things? I think she kind of implied all that stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Did she?
I think we can all read the room.
Explicitly threatened her, though, right?
Oh, of course not, because that's not how women threaten people. We don't threaten you by saying like, "Wow, that's the ugliest outfit I've ever seen." It's, "Oh, cute skirt."
I'm just saying there's some reasonable doubt in there.
Is there reasonable doubt?
I'm just saying that I'm a lesbian and I know how this works.
Okay,
fair.
Okay, all right.
I think that regardless, you have the opportunity for her not to be your murder victim.
You know, try to have a conversation with her. Like,
oh yeah, you're gonna talk your way out of that.
reasoning to her. You know, who knows? You don't know how that conversation.
Nah, she's gotta go. I said it at Bottoms. I'll say it again here. I support women's rights and women's wrongs.
So, at the end of the day, it seems like love is amazing and exciting and beautiful, but at great cost.
At great cost.
Feels like we're all kind of agreeing on that.
But I mean, the running theme, you can say like, yes, love makes you crazy, but the running theme throughout this, like, Lou is staying in that town because she loves her sister. You know, she wants to protect her from her crazy, abusive father. By the way, Jenna Malone, also perfect.
Incredible.
Well, Jenna Malone showing up in a weird ass project. I definitely got like vibes to the what was the other one? The movie I keep forgetting, the one about models. But she, like, whenever she appears in something, the Neon Demon. I love when she just gets to be weird, and she is very much like in her weird zone here because she loves her husband, even though he's an abusive piece of shit, but she genuinely loved him and she's mad at Lou because of that. Her father, Ed Harris's character, is so fascinating because he is a crime boss, right? But he runs like an amusement park version of a gun range. You know, it's like Louisville or something. Like, it's kind of like a fun town. He loves bugs. The man loves bugs. Anybody who loves bugs can't be bad, really. And
surely someone who loves bugs can't be evil.
Surely. He loves his children. Like, he is once his daughter is in the hospital, like, he and his partner take over the kids and everything. He's taking care of Lou in his respect, even though he is a terrible crime boss who's killing tons of people. Wow. He loves his family.
I want to push back on that slightly because that is the only bit of character that I didn't quite believe, I guess. It does. I understand what the movie is saying about toxic masculinity, but I didn't buy for a second that dude wouldn't have murdered the husband the first time he beat the shit out of his daughter, right? Like,
I don't know.
I feel like that dude does not stand by his children getting abused. I don't know. I had a hard time believing that
he had a very romantic version of love. He's like, well, it's her choice. He's saying it's her choice, right? Like, she's into it. And then he has this whole thing with his wife. It's like, it's like a Haruki Murakami novel or something. He's like, oh, my wife left me and I'm just left thinking about, like, what does that mean? What does that mean about me? My wife just doesn't want to be with me. What does that make me? It's kind of fascinating how he is approaching all of this. Yeah.
BJ, go ahead.
Here's my thoughts on it. So preface this by saying, do you all remember the book that Lou is reading when we first meet Lou at the gym? She's reading a book called Macho Sluts, and it's not just an evocative title, which it is. That book is specifically, it is a lot of short stories of eroticism and specifically about BDSM. And the thing about BDSM is that from outsiders looking in, if you are not in that relationship dynamic, it can view as like abusive or dangerous or toxic because, oh my God, you're like letting somebody slap you around and choke you out. Like, that's dangerous. But if you're in it, that's what feels like love to you. That's what feels good to you. That is what you are consenting to. So much of this movie is about relationships that from outside looking in look horrible and terrible, but for the people working in it, this is what feels right for them, even if it is dangerous, even if it is harmful. And what I find fascinating is that none of the characters are willing to make these like very intense judgment calls on them. It's like they have their own opinions, but they also know like it's got to be up to them. It's got to be their choice, which to me very much feels like why Lou Sr. hasn't stepped in and taken out Franco, who absolutely fucking deserves it.
Yeah, and we should also break down. I love the Lou and Jackie relationship, by the way, because listen, Katie O'Brien's great. She's got a lot of charisma. Jackie is bringing nothing to that relationship. Okay, like it's kind of funny how she's just like, we were introduced to her. She sleeps with Dave Franco's character to get a job. We're introduced to her as sort of somebody who is like always trying to get ahead, and is always taking. And the moment where she's like, it'd be great if you could remove the egg yolks from the eggs. I'm like, you're staying here for free. You cannot request anything here. Are you paying rent? Are you buying these eggs? That's a minute where I was like, that's a little much, Jackie.
Well, that's
how hot you are.
I mean, I think that's the position of the entire movie is like this love thing really makes you overlook a lot of there are red flags constantly, and this stupid emotion that we all can get.
Stupid emotion.
That's why I feel like it's an indictment more than a.
But I also do view Lou as like Lou puts on a front, but I think Lou is a more submissive person. As tough as she likes to act, like her bark is a lot louder than her bite. And so when you have this person come in and is like, "No, I'm going to order you around a little bit." I mean, she grew up with a very overbearing household. I feel like that is a natural fit for her, where she's like, "Oh yeah, I'll remove the yolks for you, sure,
if you say so." Yeah. And then we have the shots of the discarded yolks. By the way, just so sad. I don't know. But it's also fascinating.
Who among us hasn't removed yolks for someone that we loved maybe a little too much?
I mean,
who among us?
That's the true test. But it's all these. This is why this movie's so fascinating. It's like all these little things, all these little character dynamics. These characters are very rich, and there's a lot you can read into the film. So, man, it's just so good. Also, shout out to the Clint Mansell score. It's been a while since we've had like a great Clint Mansell score to like just vibe to. It's fantastic.
I think technically too, the movie does a really excellent job establishing and maintaining tension. And there are these really wonderfully directed scenes, like the scene where the FBI guys show up at her house and she's got the body behind the couch and the cat is pulling at it. Like it just amps up that tension. All of the stuff with the chasm and her plan is pretty brilliant. And that shot with the smoke, just this signal fire in the distance of, like, look over here, everybody. So it's so well executed, I think, just on a technical level for creating a noir suspense film. I was very impressed with it.
Indeed. All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. But before we end our review, BJ, you want to let people know where they can find more of your work on the internet this week?
Sure. I'm on all forms of social media at BJ Colangelo, right over at /film.com. And my podcast is This Ends at Prom. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. And at the end of the day, it is really impressive that Rose Glass made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.